Our next speaker is Mariela Rios. Mariela was born in Veracruz, Mexico. Prior to coming to Scripps, she was working as a financial analyst for HSBC Bank. Her goal is to consult and finance marine conservation initiatives by finding sustainability while promoting profitability. Mariela has one of the most unique backgrounds of this cohort coming into this program as somebody who worked in finance and bank before coming here. She really challenged herself while she was here to stretch and learn about law and policy and filmmaking as well. And I saw the film that she made in November, and it was really beautiful. So I look forward to seeing what she does with that this summer and beyond. And she took her unique background and she put it together with the new skills she had learned and the new training she had gained to apply it to a marine conservation challenge that integrated the finance piece, which is really just captures the spirit of the innovative and interdisciplinary nature of this program. So her project is called Hidden Numbers, a financial perspective on the commercial sardine fishery in Mexico.
When you look at this picture, do you see the sardines? No? Well, I hope by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping that you do. While working for HSBC Bank, I was analyzing corporations in different industries. One of the industries was a seafood producer, a poultry producer, and a pork producer. After coming to Scripps, I learned that all these three industries were related. And that could be one of the reasons why sardines are overfished. So let me tell you a little bit about the process of why this might be related. 75% of the catch, of sardine catch, is used towards indirect human consumption. That is in the form of fish meal and oil production. The fish is transformed and then utilized as animal feed. This is fed into, in this case, the pigs, and then is processed, commercialized, to then finally reach the end consumer in the form of this bacon. Interesting. All this energy to meet people's demand for this bacon, right? The idea that chickens and pork should be eating this fish has potentially contributed to the sardines being overfished, and as they are all using the same resource, the sardines, these little guys. So which led me to question, how are these industries being funded? How can we analyze the profitability of the commercial sardine fishing in Mexico, considering all of these aspects that go into one resource? I decided to focus on building a profit and loss statement. A profit and loss statement is a financial statement that summarizes revenues, costs, expenses during a specific period of time. These records can provide relevant information to know the ability or inability to generate profit in these industries. This is the most popular and common financial statement in a business, as it quickly shows how much profit or loss was generated. So if I started looking back at the sales revenue, and for the sardine industry, we must consider the number of vessels, the number of trips, the catch volume, and the price. This is just some of the elements that have to be analyzed in order to get our sales revenue. Moreover, we look at operating costs. Some of the operating costs, the operating costs are divided into fixed and variable. Fixed can be related to the cost per vessel, which is maintenance, license for the dock fees, and utilities, insurance, and so on. And for the variable costs, these can be a little bit more complicated as we look at them per trip. We look at the cost of labor, the supplies or food supplies for those trips for every time they go out to sea. And in addition, we look at fuel consumption. In order for the vessels to go out and fish, we need to look at the fuel consumption. Otherwise, they're not able to go out and fish, right? So then we go into the profit and loss statement. We look at the sales revenue, we look at the cost, we consider all of this to calculate several metrics. And one of the different profitability ratios is the gross profit margin. There's other levels of operating profits, but the most basic one is the gross profit. So first we would need to start there if we wanted to look into the profitability of the sardine industry. This profit margin, the gross profit margin, and would give us a quick understanding of the financial standing of the industry and their ability to meet their other operations, which is going out, transforming it, or selling it. All those other costs need to be covered by the primary gross profit, right? So then we move into the result of this. Talks about the efficiency, how efficient is this industry, right? So in order to get into that level of efficiency, we have to consider how the industry is doing as a whole. And for that, I based my research by looking into the history, some of the history of the sardines, some of the history of the way people have been analyzing this industry, and some of the metrics that have been used in prior studies to eventually lead to, well, is this profitable? Is this efficient? How is this doing? So let me tell you a little bit about the sardine industry in Mexico. It is the largest by catch volume, with 721,000 tons of sardine landed in 2017. This tells us, from a financial perspective, that there's a huge amount of catch, there's ways of commercializing this, and there's potential, right? The thing is, well, in addition, we learned that the industry is concentrated in the Gulf of California. Throughout many years, this industry started operations since 1960s, so it has concentrated and consolidated in the Gulf of California, and mainly it is located in the largest port is located in the Guaymas, Sonora, right where the star is. So what this is telling us is that you can have a highly concentrated area. You can have all your vessels working and extracting and having all this amount of sardines to make profit out of it. But what we need to consider are other aspects into the industry. So my findings show that in addition, the sardine fishery has high variability. In the last 3 decades, there have been 4 collapses. This is due to overfishing, to climate change, and it all impacts the variability of the sardines, which raises question of, should we invest in this? Should we not? So then we look at another thing. Great point. This industry is subsidized. 17.6 billion pesos were giving out for fishery subsidies from 2011 to 2019. A fishery subsidy, for those of you who might be interested in knowing, it's a financial contribution from the public sector that grants private benefits to the fishery sector. So the largest amount of fishery subsidies has been concentrated in the North Pacific side of Mexico, which is where the sardines are mainly concentrated and catched. 60% is concentrated in that area. Moreover, I identified through my research that this industry is, there's a lot of hidden numbers in this industry. And by hidden numbers, I mean that there's a lot of information that is missing. There is no availability of financial information, as most of the largest corporations are private, and this information is not, the financial information is not disclosed. So we can't really assess accurately or as much as I wanted to, because all of this information is not disclosed. Moreover, we look at fishery reports from the Fisheries Council, and the landings are not reported consistently. They're not reported, their reports are outdated. We don't know really where the sardines are going in terms of the exports. Where is it turning into, the amount that it's turning into different sectors? And very important, we don't know the allocation of the subsidies for like once it reaches these companies. Since they don't disclose the information, we're not able to tell, have they been using this subsidies correctly, right? And another point is we don't have information on tax breaks and all of that, which are really key in understanding the profitability of this industry. So let me move on to my Capstone project. My Capstone project was based on analyzing the profitability of the commercial sardine industry. And based on the lack of financial information and lack of landings and fisheries data, I only focus on addressing the fishing side of the industry. So I solely looked at the fishing process, and I solely look at the fuel subsidies to answer these two questions. What is the profit margin of commercial sardine fishing, and what is the contribution of fuel subsidies to this margin? I created this analysis to understand the profitability. So we remember by looking at the vessels, I found that there were 49 vessels during the year of 2015. Oh, I forgot to mention that. I based my information on 2015 because it was the year with the most accurate data. 2015 had the information across the different elements that I needed to understand the profitability. So putting all those numbers together for 2015, we get 49 number of vessels, 1,943 trips. Fishing effort is a metric for going out and fishing, which was identified through studies. The 900 liters of fuel per vessel per trip. And then we go into computing all this information, and we get that 163 million was the profit with the subsidies, giving us a 36% profit margin. This 36% translates into, for every dollar, there's 36 cents that are from the sales that are turned into profit, which tells us, then we look at the profit without the subsidies, and we get that 26% is only the profit margin for this industry. This is a highly profitable industry. Those numbers are very high, but please remember that I only looked at the gross profit. There's other costs to consider afterwards, and that I only looked at the fishing sector, at the fishing part of the process. And after computing this, we have the contribution of the subsidies, which is 9%. So we know that 9% is contributed from the government to this industry, which leads us to understanding the industry. So from a financial perspective, the sardines are highly profitable, but what does this mean? It's lower, the low cost of raw material allows it to be connected to other industries, like the process that I showed you in the beginning. And then also it's related to financial institutions because they're interested in investing in these companies, they're interested in managing their cash flow, and they're managing their new purchase vessels, and they're all related. Coastal communities, they're highly dependent on fishing, and this raises a question on if one of these components fails, it might represent a risk to all because they're so connected, right? Then some of the things to consider are in terms of the profitability, we know that for my model, there's a lot of numbers that have not been considered. There's a lot of cost in terms of other processing costs, other lines of production. There's financial risk in terms of environmental variability. How does this translate into potential losses down the line if there's other years of variability? There's political in terms of subsidy reform that I'm going to touch real quick. And then there's legal implications in the meaning that it might have some impacts if there's some total level catch or other terms. One of the potential impacts is the subsidy reform, which aims to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, the seas, the marine resources for sustainable development. If we consider responsible fishing, this could ultimately have an impact to the sardine fishery, which is not complying with these terms. My next steps would be to look at the entire process as a whole to understand the real profitability, or a more complex model that would show the real profitability, to understand, to finally create sound financial solutions for the well-being of the industry, the ecosystem, and the community. I would like to say special thanks from the bottom of my heart to Dr. Sarah Mesnig, Octavia Burto, and Alfredo Giron. I plan to continue this project, and I'm really, really happy of their guidance and support throughout this process. Thank you. And one last thing, I hope that next time you go and order some side of bacon, you think about this perspective, and maybe you'll be contributing to the oceans. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariela. So we've got a couple questions actually coming in from the web. One question is, so why do you think that the industry, both fishing and financial, considers so much of the information confidential business information or trade secrets, which ultimately frustrates proper management?
Well, there's a lot of interest, personal interest, I would say, from both the government and this industry, because it's been operating for so many years, and it has been creating or building relationships with for so many years that all these parties involved are heavily dependent on each other. So from my perspective, there's difficulty in putting those barriers, and to what extent is that ethical or right?
Yeah, and sort of a follow-on to that question, also coming from the web, is It's a public resource managed using public funds and intended to be managed in the public interest. So why isn't it?
Can you repeat that question, please?
This is a public resource managed using public funds and intended to be managed in the public interest. So why do you think it isn't managed more for the public interest versus for the fishing industry or for the finance industry?
Okay, from my point of view, it is power that has to do with how it's being managed. There's a lot of power in the industry with like consolidation and concentration. This industry is vertically integrated, meaning they manage a lot in the process. A lot goes into the process, and as you've seen, there's a lot of large amount of subsidies and millions of pesos going into this industry that makes it hard to restructure.
And then the last question is, where, Mariela, do you see this conversation going 10 years from now?
I see this conversation at all levels, meaning that touching every single industry and every stakeholder that's involved, talking about this. There has to be that analysis. There has to be that ask for financial information. There has to be that transparency. And I see this conversation leading, especially because of the pressure of the subsidy reform and all the other aspects of sustainability and health of our oceans and the variability and everything. I really see this conversation going into every single aspect of the industry and its relationship to other stakeholders.